Yo, YouTube, what's up with your boy? Sports and Fitness Rants. I'm back, guys. Hit that like button. Subscribe to my channel. What's up, y'all? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back, man. Got another great video for you guys today, as usual, man. You guys know the deal on this channel. It's all about setting the record straight, stopping the lies, stopping the narratives. And we must continue to set the record straight again, guys, off of yesterday's comments on the live Sunday show. We had one of the callers call up, my man YT Hoops, and he said some statement about Shaquille O'Neal being the greatest of all time, and that he has an argument for the greatest of all time, Shaquille O'Neal. And I do not believe that's the case. I don't think that Shaquille O'Neal has a snowball's chance in hell to be a greatest of all time argument or a top 5 or top 10 player. I don't think he has that argument, guys. And I talked about it yesterday, and we went back and forth, and it got a little sidetracked a little bit, talking about Shaquille O'Neal. And I feel like sometimes when I make these statements and I'm trying to educate people and give them the facts, people try to come at me as if that's my opinion here. Oh, man, it's your opinion. You got to respect other people's opinions and blah, blah, blah. No, I don't. Because once again, I've told you guys, your opinion must be based off reality and based off the facts. Opinions are not just something you could just say, oh, it's my opinion, this. Like I said, guys, people have an opinion the earth is flat, but they're idiots. Your opinion is ill-informed, and you sound like a fool when you say that. Because once again, there's nothing to support that. You're an idiot. You're not basing your opinion off of reality or the facts. So once again, we're going to talk about in this video because Shaquille O'Neal has no argument for a greatest of all time, top 5 or top 10 player, guys, in my opinion. And I broke it down yesterday, and we're going to go through it again today in this video real briefly, guys, because this is getting ridiculous, man, that people could even think that. Man, I want to thank you guys, everyone across the world, everyone across the states, guys. Thank you very much. I am truly, truly humbled. Shout out to everybody in the membership, guys. Thank you very much for all the continued support. You guys emailing me, sending me messages on Instagram or whatever the case may be, guys. I appreciate it. I try to get back to all you guys as soon as I can, man. Forgive me if I don't get right back to you guys. But trust me, guys, I really appreciate it, and I really look at all this stuff, man. So thank you, guys. And you guys know what to do. Turn the volume all the way up. Hit that play button. Remember, these videos are for educational purposes. And let's roll. So, yes, guys, I'm not going to go crazy with this video, guys, here, because we talked about it yesterday, and I've talked about Shaquille O'Neal several times on this channel. Excuse me, guys. And most of the time I've talked about Shaquille O'Neal on this channel, it's been my problem with him calling himself the most dominant player of all time. I have a big problem with that because it's not true. And people can say, oh, that's his opinion, or that's my opinion, or this person's opinion. But that's not the facts, guys. The facts remain. Just because Shaq says he's the most dominant, I've told you guys, if he said he's the most physically dominant, I won't argue with him about that. Yes, you can argue that Shaquille O'Neal is the most physically dominant player that's ever played in the NBA. Absolutely. His sheer size, the way he was able to move at that size, absolutely. The force and the way he was allowed to play the game in that era. Once again, I've told you guys, if Wilt Chamberlain was allowed to use his size, his strength, the way that Shaquille O'Neal was allowed to do those things in the early 2000s, in the late 90s, Wilt Chamberlain would have been dominating, but he would have been winning more. People don't understand this about Wilt Chamberlain. He wasn't allowed to use his physical size and his strength to dominate the guys physically like he would have been able to in a late 90s, early 2000s scenario. So the edge went to Shaquille O'Neal there. He had an advantage over everyone else. He was allowed to bang these guys like that and lower his body into them and use his mass. And that's great for him. So I always say it's the most physically dominant. If he wants to say that, I got no problem. But when he says dominant, now you're including all the players in NBA's history. All players in NBA's history in the dominant category. And to me, he's not on the level of a Michael Jordan's dominance. We're talking about dominance. He's nowhere near Michael Jordan's dominance. Nowhere near it. And I do not believe he's on Wilt Chamberlain's level of dominance. Like I said, he's even more dominant than Bill Russell was. So this is what we're talking about, guys. The dominance brings in all kinds of players in all positions. Was he as dominant as Tim Duncan was on both sides of the ball for all those years? The consistent durability, anchoring a top defense every single season? That's pretty dominant, making the playoffs every single year, making deep playoff runs essentially every year. That's dominance, is it not? Is he as dominant as John Stockton was? Dominating the assist titles and dishing out passing. So once again, we're talking about dominance, man. We're bringing all the players in NBA's history into dominance, right? Shaq wasn't dominating the rebounding like a Wilt Chamberlain was, or even a Dennis Rodman. That's dominance on the glass. Once again, was Shaq dominating shot blocking or anything like that? No, and I brought this up in the debate yesterday. Shaquille O'Neal has never led the league in rebounds. Not one season, guys, at 7'1", 300+ pounds. Never once led the league in rebounds. Not even one time. Not saying to lead the league in rebounds 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but not even once. You couldn't do it. That goes to effort, guys. Remember, rebounding is also effort. Let's think about effort again. Defense. Was Shaquille O'Neal ever considered a great defensive player? No, he wasn't. And once again, there goes that word great. People like to throw that term around now, great. They throw it around loosely. Shaquille O'Neal was never a great defensive player. He was a good defensive player at his best, but he wasn't consistently good, which is why he was not considered a great defender. The great defenders are consistently great or consistently good for a long period of time, which enables them to be great, to be labeled as great defenders, because they're consistently really good. Shaq was good, but not consistently for a long time. For a couple of years, then he got lazy. Right? He allowed himself to gain weight. He lost some of his athleticism, some of the athletic ability he had to get up and down the court, to jump up off the floor and get up and block some of these shots. I told you Shaq's best athletic body was in Orlando. When you look at the way he was able to run up and down the court, jump up and block shots, grab rebounds, that was his best athletic body, was in Orlando. I'm not saying that was his best version of himself, but that was the best version of him athletically, was in Orlando. Shaq in Orlando, the dude was special. This is what we're talking about. Athletically, at that size, Shaquille O'Neal was sensational, man. Like I said, he was a freak out there. But when we talk about yesterday, and my man YT Hoops makes that comment about Shaquille O'Neal having a GOAT argument or being a top 5 or a top 10 player. And I said, what did I say, guys? We must educate the people and set the record straight here and understand opinions are great. They are, but they must be based off of facts. And there must be some, like I said, factual evidence behind this stuff, and it must be based in reality. And to me, there's no reality where Shaquille O'Neal is the greatest center of all time, let's say, for example. Because for him to be in a greatest of all time conversation, right, and you're debating him against the greatest players of all time, the top 3, top 5, top 10 players, then that would mean that Shaquille O'Neal is the greatest center of all time, would it not? Or at least argument for the greatest center of all time, top 2 or 3 center. And I do not believe Shaquille O'Neal is in that conversation. How could you push Shaquille O'Neal above Hakeem Olajuwon? I don't see how you could do it. There's no argument for it. There isn't. You know, I love when the Shaquille O'Neal fans try to make an argument. What do they say? Oh, Shaquille O'Neal would dominate this guy. Right? And they talk about dominance. Why? Because they think about Shaquille's size. And this is what I'm alluding to, guys. The size of Shaquille O'Neal and the way he was able to play the game. But that does not mean that he would dominate these guys. Because once again, he did not dominate Hakeem Olajuwon in 1995. He did not. And I don't want to hear his age. Oh, Shaquille O'Neal was only in his 3rd or 4th season, whatever the case may be. I don't want to hear excuses. Penny Hardaway was in what? His 2nd season, his 1st season, whatever the hell it was. There's no excuses. Once again, man, Hakeem Olajuwon was a much older player than Shaquille O'Neal, so we could use age as an excuse for Hakeem Olajuwon. And they were swept. This wasn't like the Orlando Magic won 2 games or it was a 7-game series. They got swept out. They didn't even win 1 game. So once again, this goes to the dominance of the Houston Rockets, the dominance of Hakeem Olajuwon on both sides of the ball, and Shaquille O'Neal not raising up to that challenge. Not dominating Hakeem Olajuwon, not even getting 1 win. So Shaquille O'Neal gets exposed versus Hakeem Olajuwon. He's not a better rebounder than Hakeem Olajuwon. He wasn't a greater shot blocker or defensive player than Hakeem Olajuwon in any aspect. Not on the perimeter, not down low, not creating steals or blocks, none of this stuff. The offensive game of Hakeem Olajuwon, to me, yes, we can argue that Shaq might have been a more potent scorer because Shaq focused on scoring more. But if we think about the overall offensive arsenal, I don't think anyone's going to argue that Shaquille O'Neal had a better offensive game than Hakeem Olajuwon. Hakeem Olajuwon has a much more well-rounded offensive game. He could shoot from the mid-range better than Shaquille O'Neal. He was more effective from the free throw line. And like I said, his overall post moves were greater than Shaquille O'Neal's, right? The dream shake, the up and unders, right? The shakes, the head fakes, the ball fakes, right? All these things. Shaquille O'Neal had nothing like that. Nothing like that, right? Shaquille had the little baby hook. He had the drop step power dunk. That's it. That's literally it, guys. And I'm not saying that wasn't great for Shaquille O'Neal. He dominated with those moves, with his size he was allowed to use. And we also must think about the era that Shaquille O'Neal played in. So, to me, you can't argue Shaquille O'Neal as a top 3 center. I don't think there's any way you can say he's greater than Will Chamberlain. I don't think there's any way you can say he's greater than Bill Russell. Once again, he's not the rebounder of a Bill Russell or a Will Chamberlain. Offensively, give me Will Chamberlain. Defensively, give me Will Chamberlain and Bill Russell. running the floor, give me Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain. As far as, playmaking, give me Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain playmaking. Okay, so once again, guys, we think about the overall games. Leadership, obviously, Bill Russell's leadership is much superior to Shaquille O'Neal's. Heart, grit, give me Bill Russell. Right? Wilt Chamberlain played 82 games multiple times, played through injuries, played in a much more difficult time in the history of life. Shaquille O'Neal never played 82 games, guys. Not even once. Look how many minutes a game Wilt Chamberlain was playing in that era, doing what he was doing. Bill Russell, look how much minutes these guys played. Shaquille O'Neal ain't sniffing that. Ain't never played 82 games, guys, not even one. With all the advantages he has over those guys back in the day. Isn't that insane, guys? Wilt Chamberlain played 82 games and all these minutes at like 34, 35, 36 years old. His last 3 seasons of his career. Shaquille ain't sniffing that. Ain't sniffing that. He ain't never kept himself in condition like a Bill Russell or a Wilt Chamberlain. And once again, you could argue, is Shaquille O'Neal greater than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? Is Shaquille O'Neal greater than Moses Malone? See, for me, I would probably have Shaquille O'Neal around number 5, right above Moses Malone. Behind Kareem, Hakeem, Wilt, and Bill Russell. No particular order, but those would be my 5. So how can Shaquille O'Neal be a greatest of all time a candidate, a GOAT candidate, a top 10 player all time, when he's barely a top 5 center? And that's what I argued on the channel. And people really try to say, or I saw some people in the comments, the chats, trying to say that that's my opinion. And people can have Shaq, as a great center, or I have to respect other people's opinions. No, I don't. Once again, I do not have to respect your opinion if it's not based in reality, off the facts. If it's nonsensical, and there's nothing to back it up. I would love for someone to make a video and make an argument for Shaquille O'Neal over Hakeem Olajuwon, make a video for Shaquille O'Neal over Wilt Chamberlain, over Bill Russell, over Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I would love to hear the argument. There is no argument. What are they going to say? Oh, Shaquille O'Neal was just a big guy. There's no argument. He doesn't do anything better than those guys except for bang his body. And I guarantee you, if Shaquille O'Neal had to go against Wilt Chamberlain in his prime, and they had to go bang for bang, blow for blow, muscle for muscle, strength for strength, grit for grit, heart for heart, pound for pound, I'm going with Wilt Chamberlain over Shaquille O'Neal, guys, every day of the week. Every day of the week. And once again, let's make this very clear. I know sometimes I might come across harsh because of the way that I speak. I respect Shaquille O'Neal. I like Shaquille O'Neal. This is not a knock on Shaq. That's a problem today. A lot of these fans, you say something like I said on the Sunday live stream about Shaquille O'Neal arguably being a top 5 center. He's arguably top 5. You could argue other guys. I know people that have Shaq out of their top 5. They have Moses Malone ahead of him. So once again, there are people that probably have George Mikan over him. Maybe a David Robinson over him. Maybe a Wes Unseld. I don't know. But the bottom line is that there's no way you can say Shaquille O'Neal is a top 3 center of all time. There's no argument for it. So if that's the case, he can't be in a top 5, top 10 conversation, and certainly not the greatest of all time. You're not even the greatest at your position. There's no argument for it. Not even top 3 at your position. No argument for it. So once again, it disqualifies Shaquille O'Neal from being a greatest of all time. I do not believe he's close to the greatest of all time. To me, Shaquille O'Neal is somewhere in that top 15 range, I would say. That to me, top 15, top 20. To me, that's where Shaq would be. I don't do these lists like that, but to me, that's where he would be. Somewhere in that range. Seems about right. So, as you guys can see here, like I said yesterday in the Sunday live stream, Shaquille O'Neal's a great player, all-time great. No one says he's not an all-time great. He's an all-time great player. But to be considered a greatest of all time, no. To be considered a top 5, top 10 player, I do not believe so. And the way that Shaquille O'Neal runs his mouth these days on these podcasts, he's not doing himself any favors. Because all he's doing is forcing people like me to set the record straight on him. And once again, to correct history, because they're trying to rewrite history now. And that's what I think a lot of Shaquille O'Neal's fans, they're falling for the rewriting of history that Shaquille O'Neal does when he speaks. And they try to say things. Like one dude came on and was like, yo, you got to think about the era Shaq played in. And I said, name them. Name the guys that Shaq was going against when he was dominating. And he couldn't name anybody. And I wasn't saying that to embarrass him or to try to call him out as he didn't know anything. What I want him to do was say the names of the guys that Shaq was going against. Because if you read them out loud or you say them out loud, then you realize It's not the great players that you thought it was. See, a lot of people say Shaq's era was the 90s. A lot of people say Shaq's era was the 2000s. I look at Shaquille O'Neal more as an early 2000s player. Shaquille O'Neal never won an MVP in the 90s, right? Never made an all-defensive team in the 90s. He never won a Defensive Player of the Year award in the 90s. I believe he made his first All-NBA first team, I believe in 98, if I remember correctly, at the end of the 90s. And why was this, guys? Why did he never win an MVP or make an all-defensive team, never won a rebounding title or a block title in the 90s? Why he didn't win a championship in the 90s? Why was this, guys? Because they were great, great players in the era in the 90s, even though they wanted to try to tear it down. He wasn't beating Michael Jordan. This is why he ran away from Orlando and went to the West Coast. He went to the Western Conference to get away from Michael Jordan. But don't talk about how dominant Shaq was. He was so dominant, he ran from Michael Jordan. You see what I'm saying, guys? Will Chamberlain ain't running from nobody. Bill Russell ain't running from guys. They couldn't do those things. Shaquille O'Neal did that. Instead of grinding it out and trying to go through Michael Jordan, he tried to go around Michael Jordan and run from Michael Jordan. But he didn't win. So you had Michael Jordan blocking you. You had Hakeem Olajuwon blocking you from MVPs and defensive teams and rebounding titles and blocks titles. You had guys like Dikembe Mutombo. You had your own draft class guys like Alonzo Mourning. Right? And you had the guys like Rick Smiths. Right? You had all these other guys. You had the Robert Parishes out there, the Patrick Ewings. Right? All these great players, all these great big men in the 90s. So once again, it wasn't just Shaquille O'Neal beating up on guys. Who did he beat up on? He didn't beat those guys. He became the Shaq Diesel in the early 2000s when all those guys were gone or on their last years. Ewing was old, Hakeem Olajuwon, Robert Parrish, right? All the big name guys. The Mutombos are getting old now, right? Karl Malone, right? Dennis Rodman. They're all old now, right? All the big guys that were in the way. So now here goes Shaq in the early 2000s going against who? Going against what? Guys like Tim Duncan. He's not a center. Kevin Garnett's not a center. They're great players. They're not centers, though, man. Right? Ben Wallace was his biggest competition. Ben Wallace, 6'9". And Ben Wallace was doing the job on Shaq. So you're going against a great defensive player like Ben Wallace, who's stout, right? Gives the effort on the defensive end. And look what happens to Shaquille O'Neal. That wasn't Patrick Ewing. That wasn't David Robinson. That wasn't Hakeem Olajuwon. That wasn't Mark Eden or Dikembe Mutombo, Karl Malone, Dennis Rodman. Some of these great players, these great defensive guys, these big bodies. He went against guys like an old Dikembe Mutombo in the finals, right? He went against broken down Rick Smiths with the bad feet. I told you, these guys were all done by then. Mutombo was still a solid player, but he wasn't Mutombo of 94 or Mutombo in 95. He went against who? Todd McCullough on the Nets? Jason Collins, Aaron Williams? These are the guys that were attempting to slow down Shaquille O'Neal in the finals. So Shaquille O'Neal dominated those guys like he should have. Shaq did what he was supposed to do. But for some reason, Shaq lost his way. And he underachieved. And that was the whole point there, guys. Shaquille O'Neal is an underachiever. He underachieved. It's not, oh man, how do you call Shaq an underachiever? He's got a great business. He won 4 championships. He did all the, we're not saying he's an underachiever in life. We're talking about underachieving in your basketball career for the potential you had. That's underachieving, guys. Shaq is very successful. No one's saying he's a loser. He underachieved his basketball career. He didn't he didn't squeeze every bit out. That's on him. He didn't do it. He knows he didn't do it. His fans don't want to understand this. Those are the facts. Some guys underachieve. When we talk about LeBron James and we say he's underachieved, his fans will say, the guy's got 4 championships, been playing for 21 years, scored all these points, but he underachieved. Once again, we're not saying he underachieved in life, but we're saying for his career, for the potential he had, right? He underachieved. And how did he underachieve? Because he took all these super teams and still lost more than he won. You underachieved. All this walking around and standing around defense, you're underachieving. You should have way more defensive selections. You should be regarded as an all-time great defender, but you're not. Never won an MVP in your 30s? That's underachieving. Where are you at? You're lollygagging around. These are the facts, guys. So to me, Shaq ain't nowhere close to those guys, man. And he's not a top 10 player of all time. You can't be top 10 if you're not even top 3 of your position. And there's no arguing for that. Those are the facts. That's not hate on Shaq, man. I love Shaq's personality, the charisma, the way that he came into the NBA in the 90s, man. He was great for the league, man. But he underachieved. He didn't push himself. He didn't work as hard as he should have. He was busy doing movies and making music. And I get all of that, man. No one's knocking Shaq for doing what he did. What we're saying is because he chose that path, he underachieved. He wasn't as great as those players. He wasn't a great rebounder, a great defender. He wasn't in great shape his whole career. He wasn't a great leader. Those are the facts, man. You guys know the deal. I'll catch you guys on the next one.